This particular reading from the Bible has to be understood as a living conversation between Jesus and the people who were sitting in front of him, who would be people very much like ourselves. It's easy to imagine that in a different time and place where customs were different in clothing and circumstances, that somehow human beings would be something other than what we are. But that's a mistake, and that's one of the reasons why the teachings of Krishna from centuries and centuries ago, the teachings of Jesus, of Buddha, of Lord Rama, that's why we can still feel the living power and magnetism of them, is because they were delivered by masters who themselves understood human nature, and they were delivered to devotees who were very much like ourselves. Truthfully, it's a myth to think that just, where you get your food and what your house looks like and what your clothes or your skin look like really change human consciousness. It doesn't. We always are trying to make little changes like that in the hope that it'll change us. But the unfortunate thing, as Swamiji puts it so simply, is that wherever we go, we're there. And that's the problem. I know in the times that I've gone into seclusion I tend to need a longer seclusion rather than a short one, because it usually takes about 2 or 3 days, as I put it for Asha, to go away, and that we can sort of begin to relax into more of our soul nature and not just our personality. Now, Jesus came to bring a message that was not a message of discouragement and despair. Just think about it for a minute. When you see someone standing on the side of the road promising you that the world is about to end and that you really need to begin to suffer early because it's going to end soon, and you need to give up everything that you think you enjoy so that you'll be ready for the tumultuous collapse of it all, it's not very magnetic to us, is it? And if you have a speaker who's lugubrious and uninteresting and everything that he has to say to you makes you feel worse than you were when you walked in, you're probably not going to come back. The human nature responds to certain understandable characteristics. Primarily among them is hope. And especially bliss, hope of love, hope of peace. Whether or not we're experiencing it in the moment, what we are drawn to is those things and those people and those teachings who tell us that something that we want will come to us, and especially who inspire us with an understanding, a practical understanding of how to attain it. If you're a sports person and you're an athlete and you find a coach who works you really hard, but then once you get out on the field, all of his drills prove to be valid and your team goes like clockwork and you play beautifully and win every game, the next time you come back to the coach and the coach asks you to do something you don't quite understand, you're going to believe in him a little bit more because of the experience. Or maybe the coach comes to you with a really winning record and it makes you predisposed to want to listen to him. But what will teach you and what will give you faith and interest and even the willingness to come back again is because of what you feel and what you experience. So very often with divine masters and divine teachers, they are not teaching to our present consciousness. What good would that do? Now, people who teach to the present consciousness are often very, very popular. Swami Kriyananda remarked once, this was before Michael Jackson fell from grace. This was the time in which he was a worldwide figure in the music world. And Swami Kriyananda, the founder of Ananda, living way outside popular culture, had never even heard of him. And some of the teenagers in our community were shocked that he didn't even know who he was and felt that it was incumbent upon them to fix this hole in his education, and presented him with some of the recordings of Michael Jackson. Swamiji was open-minded and curious enough to listen to the music. And then afterwards he made this interesting comments. First, he said, the man was perfectly in tune with the consciousness of our times. There's a mass consciousness at any time on earth. He said Michael Jackson knew exactly what that was right on that wavelength, and translated it into music. And that's why the whole world loved him, because they were looking at themselves. Here I am, and there he is. He's put it into music. I feel totally comfortable here. And so everybody, lionized him as they did. He also then said, he's a consummate artist. He did it perfectly. He knew what he wanted to do, and he did it perfectly. Then the last thing Swamiji said is, I have no interest in popular consciousness as it is right now. His mission, our mission, is where we're going. Where we're going as a society, because this is Dwapara Yuga, this is a new age rising, and where we're going as individuals in our own consciousness. Now, no one comes to the path of self-realization, even if those of you in the room may secretly still have Michael Jackson tapes. I don't know, and I won't ask. Our policy is don't ask, don't tell. Okay? But all of you are here because in some way or another, you intuitively know, or perhaps far more than intuitively, actively every day know, that you're not exactly who you feel you could become. And primarily that the full portion of divine bliss, which somehow or another all of us have gotten hope that it will be ours, is not yet ours. And so we've become motivated to try to find out how we can transform our consciousness from what it is now into something we would rather have it be. And of course that possibility can be generalized, and people will then seek, as people always do. Everything that we do is motivated by some thought within us that this will give me something of what I want. No matter how misguided that impulse turns out to be, it always seemed like a good idea at the time. And that's just, I don't know how many times in my incarnation, I just have to ruefully say, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And then you look at it now and you can't imagine what you were thinking, but you did it because you thought it would give us, we thought it would give us, more of what we really wanted. Now, over the course of our lives, as we mature, hopefully, and don't merely grow up, and get bigger in our ignorance, as we hopefully mature a little bit as we grow up, our experience and our wisdom grows. And things that we at first thought would be terrible to do, I've quoted in here, I remember a conversation I witnessed between two, at that time, 8-year-old boys, when we were doing Christmas caroling in our house, that we have these parties in our home at Christmas time, and we were sitting down to do Christmas carols, and it's an adult and child party, and 2 of the little boys who are 8, and quite dynamically 8 little boys, sat down right in the front, and they were right in front of me, so I leaned over and I said, okay, if you're going to sit in the front row, you're going to have to be good. And one of the little boys just muttered under his breath, I hate being good. Just like that. And Graham, who was sitting next to him, said, you'll get used to it. And that's exactly the truth. We hate being good at first because we feel it's going to deprive us of what we want. And so we indulge ourselves. We indulge ourselves in tantrums as we're children, and maybe in tantrums as we're adults. We indulge ourselves in what we think is going to make us happy. We make a commitment to one life partner, and then we get a little restless, and we sort of go test the waters here and there, and then our primary relationship blows up in our faces, and we think, well, that wasn't such a good idea. We think, oh, I can drink, even though I have a huge genetic predisposition toward alcohol, I can handle it. 25 years later, when we finally dry out, we say, well, that didn't work. All of the different things that we go through, you can think about it, all of them. Giving free rein to our temper, being too critical of other people, all these different things. And we find out that they don't work. And when we really get humbled by discovering how much it can seem like a good idea and how bad an idea it can turn out to be later, then we begin to seek those who demonstrably know more than we do. And step by step, as we expand literally our idea of the possible. See, what the masters bring to us is an infinite idea of the possible. Everything in life is directional. We find that we're older today than we were yesterday. Maybe we're wiser today than we were yesterday, or we're sadder today than we were yesterday. We're always going in one direction or another. And what the masters put forward for us is the ultimate and final destination of all our wanderings. And they speak to us of perfect bliss. Jesus says, "Be ye therefore perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect." Jesus says, "That which I do, ye shall do, and greater things." Master speaks of, Paramhansa Yogananda speaks of infinite bliss, of perfect happiness, of samadhi. The words on the wall of this temple are taken from his poem describing cosmic consciousness, a tiny bubble of laughter. I have become the sea of mirth itself. A beautiful poetic statement of the infinite possibilities of our consciousness. And then what the masters also tell us is how to get from where we are now to where they are and to where we might be. So when Jesus stands up and says to his disciples or his devotees or to the people who happen to wander in the street, I suspect these words were not delivered at a random gathering, but they were more likely delivered to a group of people who already had faith in his capacity to take them where they wanted to go. Because then he challenges them, and in the most unequivocal way, you must leave hearth and home. You have to, I come not to bring peace, but I bring a sword, to divide families against themselves. The people that you love the most will become your enemies. If you have to give up your life, you have to lose your life in order to find it. I mean, it's pretty easy to say, I don't think this is my path, But Jesus himself would not have challenged his disciples to that extent unless he knew they also understood that he could take them to a place they would want to be. And what we have to understand on the spiritual path is that the spiritual path is not a celebration of who and what we are experiencing right now. Now, nor does it denigrate, the bubbles of joy that we presently have. But it's teaching us that every little thing that we have now can be expanded to infinity if we understand how to do it. And what he's trying to say with this statement is that what you're experiencing inwardly is your true reality. And the more you can live from your inner consciousness. A few days ago, David and I went to a place right up here in Redwood City and got to spend 2.5 hours with this man who has invented a system for being able to create a physical image of the energy around you, of your aura. He has a sensor and then very complicated software is basically what it is, and a little webcam to take a picture of your physical body. You put your hand on the sensor, you sit in front of the webcam in front of a computer screen, and you're suddenly looking at your physical body surrounded by the light of your aura. And I'm child enough and phenomena enough to say, wow, this is really neat. And then pictures of what your chakras look like. This man's been working out for 40 years. He's your wonderful, quintessential mad scientist. He's fabulous. Very sweet. You can see in his eyes he lives in another world. Okay. David and I both had real pretty auras. That's all I can say. We were real pretty. And the technicians, the scientists and his partner who were working with us remarked, there were notable things about our auras. Among others, they were very stable. And apparently people's auras are much more, and the colors were more stable and they were more specific. They were very specific, stable looking auras. Another interesting feature, just by the way, was when they showed the chakras, that our chakras, all of them were very even in their expression, which I think would be a result of Kriya Yoga practice, in which you're always working with all of the chakras simultaneously and developing them together. They said also people who don't have practices, their chakras are all uneven, reflecting more of the dispersion of their consciousness. I'm telling you all this just because it was so neat. Here's the whole point. She asks us, because the scientist himself knew us. He knew Kriyananda, he knew Ananda. He didn't know us personally, but he knew what we were doing. His partner didn't know us at all. So she asked sort of like, who are you? What do you do? And I had to try to think of a way to translate it. And I said, we've been living for many years from the inside. And it was really an interesting way, even for myself, when I heard it. Because there's many different ways that you can define what it is to be on the spiritual path. But the deepest definition of it is, we live from the inside. And our inner reality is our primary focus, and even our definition of ourselves. And we cultivate that inner reality by devotion, by prayer, above all by meditation, by the practice of Kriya, which is a superb technique for doing so. Just as a little tiny piece in here, because they can do this in real time, they make videos. They used to just make snapshots of your aura, these machines. Now they can make videos, and then you can load them up onto YouTube and email them to your friends. I think it's fantastic. Anyway, so I was sitting there, and there I am just sitting there, and my aura is still real pretty, but after a while you get tired of looking at it. They suggested that I meditate. So I started meditating, and I actually saw it played back later. But as soon as I started meditating, the colors changed. And actually, it began to turn white. And then this sort of puffy thing came out up here. I mean, I can't say for certainty that this is true, but this man is deeply sincere, and he's worked on this for a long time. I think this, it felt true. It felt like we were really looking at something valid here. Because you could also interact our auras. Here I go again. David and I are interacting our auras, and you could watch them change, and you would watch our colors merge. And then we would back out, and they wouldn't be there. And then when David was all alone, and I wasn't on screen, but I was off to one side, there was a streak of my color right here on his picture. Isn't that interesting? Fascinating. Now, all of this has to do with what I was starting to say, living from the inside. You see, and the power of living from the inside is really self-evident. You always have it. And it's not dependent on anything that's going on around you. We live our lives so conditioned by circumstances. I'm wealthy, I'm healthy, I'm alone, I'm in company, I'm respected, I'm insulted, I'm triumphant, I'm defeated, I'm young, I'm old, I'm fat, I'm pretty, whatever it is, it just goes like this, like this. What's the characteristic of all of those? The unifying characteristic of all of those things is that they are conditions outside of our reality. And for the most part, they're out of our control. Right now, we live in really marvelously insecure times. We just don't know what. The economy, the world, we just have no idea what's going to happen out there. And no ordinary human being seems to have any real capacity to influence us. It could make us really, really nervous. And insofar as we live from the outside, we're going to be nervous. But insofar as we live from the inside, wherever it goes, it's always there. And if we're constantly cultivating our happiness from within ourselves, we use words like unconditional love, unconditional bliss, unconditional acceptance. Those words, unconditional, these are the kinds of words the masters use on us, about our potential, about themselves, that their lives and our lives need not be conditioned by anything outside of us. Wow, we say, that's for me. And then Jesus sort of starts to make a bigger picture. He says, well, if your life is really going to be from the inside and not conditioned by external circumstances, you're not going to be able to also cling to all those things outside yourself that you believe are the source of who you are. And so this rather challenging statement by Jesus is balanced by the Gita reading that describes the end point, that the yogi, firmly established in his own infinite nature, just looks upon this world with an even eye. And when praise comes, he's calm in the face of it. When blame comes, he's calm in the face of it. When wealth comes, he's calm in the face of it. When he's surrounded by those who love him and the people that he loves, he's calm in the presence of that wonderful experience. And when circumstances take it away from him, his bliss is not conditioned by circumstances. So when Jesus tells us, I come to bring not peace but a sword, he's not really telling us to go home and say, mother-in-law out of the house, wife out of the house, children on your own. It would not be sensible to behave that way. But what he's talking about is within ourselves. And the sword that he's speaking of is a very common way of speaking of the sword of discrimination. To use the God-given capacity within us to discern between that which is eternal and that which is ephemeral. Because what it is to live from the inside is to live in eternity. Because inwardly, nothing ever changes. In the deepest part of ourselves. The part of us that is an expression of the infinite, the eternal, the now, is always in the same state of unconditioned bliss. What changes is all of these circumstances. Every single one of us, from this morning till now, many things have shifted. And when we look back at pictures of ourselves as children or our parents long gone or anticipated what we're going to be, everything that changes is all outside ourselves. But the more deeply rooted we become in the divine within, which is why Jesus says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. What he means by that is everything that you think you need to have holding on from the outside, you will find it within you. And then he even says, and all these things will be added unto you. Home, lands, everything, and persecutions, he adds, I might say. But meaning, you can live in this world. You can be a householder in this world. You can be a great success in this world. But what do you call your life? And that's where Jesus says, if you lose your life, you will have your life. Meaning, if you no longer define your life by that which is beyond your control and ever shifting, but experience it from inside. Live with God in your heart. Live with Master in your heart. Live with Jesus in your heart. And together, sort of peer out with interest and with a responsible attitude, toward what circumstance God has given you. And work with those things. But use the sword of discrimination. Oh, great tragedy has struck my life today. Do I need to now define myself by that tragedy? Yes, you may have to deal with that tragedy, certainly, if it comes in within your realm of responsibility. But do I have to define my life by that tragedy? Or can I allow that part of my life to just go away? Whatever tragic thing happened and took it away, lose my life in that way. But living from the inside, I find that God is always with me. There's an extraordinary story, true, that Master tells in his own voice on one of his recordings about St. Anthony in the desert. Right after Jesus died, the immediate response of many of his disciples was to go into extreme isolation. It was the dark materialistic age getting worse. Jesus was born the nadir of that cycle was 500 AD. So for the 500 years after Jesus' death, life on earth got worse and worse and worse. This is the cycle of the yugas, the changing ages on this planet, of which there's a very good book now, which I always plug when I get a chance. But at any point, there was no reason, there was no point in Jesus' disciples immediately after his death trying to build anything in the way that we're trying to do now, because it was Kali Yuga descending, and at 500 AD, literally, the barbarians swept through and destroyed almost everything. So what the disciples of Jesus were inspired by God to do was to withdraw. And in fact, much of civilization was saved by those hidden monasteries, and the barbarians sort of swept through, and they had kept remnants of the truth hidden away, and then when the age began to rise, they began to creep out with it again. So solitary meditation in complete separation from society was a very valid spiritual thing to do at that point. And St. Anthony of the Desert was one of the most extraordinary examples of this way. And he went deeper and deeper and deeper into solitude and meditated for decades in one cave, one abandoned tomb, and another farther away abandoned tomb. And for decades he would meditate. And the story of his realization is being tested at the crest of his effort by, there was no other person around, but the dark force took form, spoke to him in voice and threatened him. And there were hieroglyphics, I think, on the wall, pictures of animals, and these animals came alive, and these monsters came, and it was all this force asking him, how much courage do you have? How much determination do you have? We experience these things through our external life. He experienced them all on the spiritual realm. I'm living from the inside with my relationship to Jesus, but all of these fearful things are threatening him and, telling him, give up, run away, forsake your determination. Jesus is a myth. None of this is true. And it rises to this tremendous crescendo. And Anthony holds firm, and in his determination to live his life only from the inside, he conquers. And all of this darkness dissipates, and Jesus appears to him. And then Anthony says, Lord, where were you? A natural question. When I was being tormented, where were you? And Jesus answers, Anthony, I was just the same with you. I was always with you. Now that's where we're going. Now, we don't necessarily have to go into a dark tomb for decades, but maybe we do. But what we want to know, and the only way we can know it, is just like the athletes preparing for a game. You don't become good at something without determination, discipline, and sacrifice. We all know that. Do you imagine that we can become that powerful without having to make serious choices between the ephemeral and the eternal? Between the momentary pleasure and the disciplined effort to build ourselves to something even greater than we can imagine? So Jesus says, I come not to bring peace. I did not come for you to settle comfortably into your nice little houses and your nice little homes and your nice little people. It's fine, but you are so much more. Take the sword of your own understanding and use it not to deny yourself, but to liberate yourself for who we really are. God bless you.